Welcome into the At Large Bid Bearcats podcast. Tonight, I'm joined by a special guest, 2017 Cincinnati Hall of Fame inductee, Jim Kelly Jr. Jim, good to have you on.
Well, thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me. Happy to be talking football here in mid-July.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a chance to meet and sit with Jim during Big 12 Media Days these last few days, last week. What was your impression on that, Jim? You know, you've been around Cincinnati athletics for a while.
Right. It was first class all the way. I really wanted to experience it because I knew it'd be a little bit different than what I was used to in the AAC. But at the same time, and even though I'd done a game there at AT&T Stadium where the Cowboys play, or Jerry World, as some people like to call it, the Alabama game 2 years ago. Being down on the field and in the stadium and kind of having, free reign, you could literally walk anywhere you wanted in the stadium. It was the coolest thing I've ever been through. And in talking to some media guys and other folks that have been involved with other big conferences, they were the same way. It's like, this is so cool. Like the Big Ten as well as the SEC, they would just do it in the ballroom of a hotel room, right? Which is quite honestly what I think the Big 12 did in the past until they were able to, secure Jerry's World. But all of them said the same thing. This is over the top and it is so nice. And it was really, really neat. I walked away incredibly impressed with everything the Big 12 did for these media days.
So what about the food? I got to get your take on the food.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was free, so it was okay. It could have been a little better, but so the one thing I will say for the AAC, when they used to do it not in Providence, in Newport, Rhode Island, before they moved to not too far from where we were. They moved to Fort Worth, and they do it down there now. But when they were in Newport, Rhode Island, they did a clam bake. And it was a really nice event. Now, the meetings themselves were in the Hyatt Ballroom, so it wasn't a whole lot different than what we were talking about with the SEC or the Big Ten. But the food there, it was fine. We didn't go hungry, but it could have been better. I'd have been happier with a steak or cheeseburger or whatever. But no, it was good. The whole thing was just first class, I thought.
Yeah, it's crazy. You walk in there and it's completely different from anything I've ever experienced.
I agree.
You're walking in, all the history inside of AT&T Stadium. The Miller Lite Club where the Cowboys walk out. That's where your restroom is. You've got, God, what would you say, 150 different media members there from all different types of outlets?
Yeah, I mean, there was 300 people there, not counting the coaches and the players and the staff with them. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how many media outlets were represented, but in some markets, Austin being one, I shouldn't say Austin, but the University of Texas, which I think goes a lot bigger than just Austin. When they were doing their individual press conference, there is probably 14, 15 cameras there, and what would you say, 50, 60 people standing around talking to Quinn Evers and whoever. I don't remember the other players' names that were there.
He's Worthy, the wide receiver.
Yeah, that was like, now I get it. The Texas brand is so big. And Oklahoma's the same way. And, of course, they're both leaving. And the schools that are staying had good coverage, too. I mean, wasn't like any coach had to sit there and talk to one person. There was always a group around. There was always a group around the players, and I thought it was just an extremely well-run thing. And the things that did not involve, the coaches and players, some of the things, Brett Yormark, who the commissioner, thought he was fabulous. The gentleman that spoke first thing Thursday morning from the National Football Foundation, I mean, I thought he did a great job as well. So I just think the whole thing was put together and was very, very well done.
Yeah, well, and if anything, media coverage both days, it's great exposure for Cincinnati. You look at all the different outlets that Scott Satterfield was on, Dante Corleone, Juwan Briggs, Emory Jones, national stories that are coming out on those guys. If anything, it's great exposure for the program heading into the season. I do got to get your take on the big topic on day one as we were sitting by each other were the new uniforms. Even though they weren't the final product, what are your thoughts on the new Nike uniforms?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, the Cincinnati, UCF, and Houston were all three next to each other. And and I hear what you're saying about them not being the finished product. And I don't have any knowledge to what, the finished product looks like. All three of those, both Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF, were very, very plain. Now the Bearcats, I think, came off looking maybe a little bit plainer because it was white. It was white pants, white jersey, black helmet. Where at least Houston had, all red and UCF had all black. But that being said, I mean, I looked at it, and one of the things I thought was interesting is, hopefully I'm remembering this right. There was one Under Armour, one Adidas, one had the Jumpman, which was Oklahoma, which is Nike, of course. And then the other 11 were all Nike. So Nike was overwhelmingly represented. And the Nike uniforms, particularly the three that I just mentioned, were very, very similar in the way you get different colors, but at the same time, not a whole lot different to them other than obviously helmets were a little bit different, as well as the colors. I don't know. I mean, I think the one thing, it's always one of those things. Under Armour did a really, really good job on the uniform side of things. Yeah. Maybe not so much on what you and I would wear, but they did. In my opinion, they did a really, really good job on the uniform side. That's not to say that we're sitting here talking about plain uniforms that Nike's not going to do a great job. I don't know the answer to that. It's just too early in the game right now. But that being said, it was. To see the Cincinnati uniform and knowing that was kind of the unveiling, although I'm sure there's been eyes on it before. There wasn't a lot to see there, and I do believe that because it was white, it showed a little bit different, even and a little bit, I don't want to say boring, but plainer because it was all white.
Yeah, I think I saw the reason they didn't have a black uniform was because it wasn't going to arrive on time. And then
that's what I mean. We're in the early stages here,
right? Yeah. And then as far as the differences, the Cincinnati was kind of just a patch. I think on the final product, Cincinnati is actually sewn in letter by letter.
It'd be direct embroidered. Yeah, that was interesting on all of them. Not everybody had that across the chest. But if you went and Cincinnati wasn't the smallest, but it might have been the second smallest. But then I think it was Kansas, of course, less letters. Theirs was huge. It looked like a billboard, but I liked it. It was good looking. Oklahoma was a little bit smaller. I think was it UCF that just had the UCF logo in there. They didn't even have something.
Yeah, I think BYU's was like that as well. With just the
logo. And whatever. I mean, it's one of those things where the reason Oregon goes to 13 sets of uniforms every year, if they play 13 games, which they usually do, is to attract those young kids who, at an early age in the 7th grade, 6th grade, like the uniforms that Oregon has. And if they become good enough football players where they are recruited at a high level, then in many cases, they've chosen that. Now, I think Cincinnati's kind of been, I would say they've been a recipient of that in the past as well. The brand's well known. The CPAW in particular. And in the past, they've had some really, really nice uniforms. And, when I say that, I'm talking over the last 10 years or so. And in particularly the last, what has it been, 6 for Under Armour? Yeah. Maybe a little bit longer than that. Fickle was here 6. Tuberville got it started. So, maybe 8 years. But, whatever, we'll see where it goes. And the old school side of me says it doesn't matter what you're wearing; it's how you play. But at the same time, you do want to look good. So
it's like Deion Sanders says, "You
look good, you play good. You play good.
Right?
You play good, you make a lot of money."
if Jim Kelly were bringing back a throwback for the Cats to wear in a game, which year are you bringing back?
That's a good question. The one that they did a throwback, I think it was 2 years ago. And it was from, I don't remember exactly, 82, 83, 84, somewhere in that range. That was really nice looking. Now I'm looking at my two jerseys that I wore. We had a white one and a red one. We had, on the red jersey, we had, 3 stripes on the sleeve and numbers on the shoulder, number on the back and the front, and name, and that was it. And the pants were white with a red and black stripe down the side, but they look good. I mean, the color, I love the color combination. Obviously, in the Big 12, Texas Tech has a lot of red and black as well. But I don't know the throwback. There has been a couple along the way in the last 7-8 years that Under Armour period where I look at them and I go, those are really sharp. So, and helmets seem to change with the week these days because you now can give them this treatment. You don't have to, you don't have to get another helmet. You can treat those. And so you've got that helmet broke in, you're used to wearing it. This is what we're going to wear next week. You don't have to start over with another helmet. They're just going to take care of it for you and make it look like something new, which is a pretty cool way to do it.
Yeah, well, it's crazy. I graduated from high school in 2006, and even just looking back, I guess 17 years ago, in order to get a new helmet, you had to send it off. It had to be painted, had to be conditioned, and just the technology and different things they can do from week to week to change around. It's crazy.
Yeah. So, and the other thing that's pretty cool about it, as you can see behind me, I've got a good number of helmets. I've got the oldest one I have here is from 1966, and the newest one I have is from last year. And to hold those two helmets up, both from a weight standpoint and when you look inside of them and you see the padding, and there's one from 66 and the padding from last year, it's kind of got those air things in it where they can pump air in and make it fit tight around your head. And it's the differences are amazing, but as we all know, with the concussions and different injuries, it's really cool to see what they're doing to these new helmets. And they're not overly heavy compared to the old ones, but at the same time, there's a little more weight there, and obviously there's a lot more protection.
Right. So switching gears here a little bit, you've been around Cincinnati for over 40 years between playing and broadcasting. Cincy Reigns is a new NIL collective. When you look at all the investment that Cincinnati's making to athletics between, baseball, football, new locker rooms for both basketball programs, what does a brand like Cincy Light and partnering with the Ryan guys, what does that kind of say about the investment Cincinnati's making and the way the brand has grown over the years?
Yeah, that's the Cincy Reigns, and let's just say the NIL on a whole is something that is really, really different. And I know if you talk to some of the older coaches, and Luke Fickell, and not that he's by any means old, but he was like, in private conversations, he was like, I know this isn't going to go away, but I really don't embrace it. But he also knew that if he didn't embrace it, it was going to be a problem. So, I hate to say it, but the guys that are my age or maybe even a little bit older are like, well, look, we got a free education out of this deal. They don't need anything else. Well, that might be true. And it is great that you get a free education, but that's not the way the world is right now. So you better embrace the NIL. And that being said, things like the deal that Cincy Reigns put together, or that UC put together with Ryan Geist and Cincy Reigns, the collective, those are very, very important. You're going to see more of those as well. And the Cincy Reigns in particular, it's great that the quarterback on the football team can get on an NIL deal. But what about the girl that plays, defense on the lacrosse team? She needs to get a little bit of reimbursement too. And that's where Cincy Reigns comes in and really, really fits the bill. And that collective, and that may not be the only one. And, not to say that young lady can't have her own deal too, but it's more likely that, the quarterback on the football team is going to get it over the person who's, somebody that on the lacrosse team. But, I got $15 a month in laundry money when I played, and it's going to be a lot more than that. And quite honestly, not necessarily lacrosse, soccer, baseball. Baseball probably makes a little bit of money, but basketball and football men's and ladies basketball, and then of course football. That's where they make the money and bring it in. But at the same time, those athletes, regardless of what sport they're on, I think UC has about 450 of them total, male and female. They need to get paid a little bit. I don't have a problem with that at all.
Yeah, I think revenue sharing is definitely important when it comes to NIL. I mean, you look at these massive TV deals. I don't see any reason why an athlete shouldn't profit off of that as well.
Correct.
You look. Did you have a chance to try Cincy Light at the Reigns
I
event?
did. I did. I went to Ryan Geist the day that it was unveiled, and I was there for, I don't know, an hour, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, and it was number one. I was absolutely flabbergasted by the crowd that was there, because down on the riverfront you had Taylor Swift and you had the Reds, who had sold out the stadium, and so I'd spent a little time on the banks before I went up to Rheingeist, and it was just a great day for Cincinnati. And then to get up there to Rheingeist and see all the people that were there, I happened to be there the same time the band came in and the cheer squad, or the spirit squad. And so I think a dollar goes to Cincy Reigns. So I contributed my $5 that day.
Right.
I maybe didn't have 5, but I had 3, and I like it. And I don't want to get up and disturb it, but I got one huge can sitting here on my bar as well.
Yeah, I got there a little too late to get the crowler, but I'm definitely going to have to get back. I thought it was kind of an upscale like Coors Light. That's the best way I can explain it.
Yeah. Well, they have a light beer. I think it's a lager, it might be a Pilsner, that they call Cheetah.
Yep, that's one of my favorites.
That's an existing brand for Rheingeist. And I kind of do that, particularly just some of the craft beers can get a little bit heavy and also carry a little bit too much alcohol. So I would always be a Cheetah person anyway if I was at Rheingeist. But that being said, this one's even a little lighter than that. And I would put it in the category of, pick your light beer, Coors Light, Bud Light, Miller Light, in that range. So, but I like it because, it is light. It's a little lower in alcohol, but still there's a little, plenty of flavor there.
Yeah, well, I think the big thing is as it continues to expand out away from Cincinnati. Like I know there's a place in Lexington that's carrying it now, and I think as you start getting into Dayton and Columbus, and maybe it goes national. I mean, that's huge for the collective, and just growing that Cincy brand even more. Well, it's all about the running joke with the younger crowd is at tailgates is, hey, we're just doing our part to recruit.
Well, the good thing is that, and I'm sure that, the athletic administration at UC is trying to work with every big company in Cincinnati. But when you look at the Rheingeist brand, I mean, they're big. There's other ones in town. Mad Tree is huge as well, and Braxton's good size. And I'm probably leaving a few out, and that's not purposely, but from the Rheingeist standpoint, they can get that footprint out there. I know, I'm trying to think, the last email I saw had like 55 locations locally where you can get it. And most of them are ones that you would expect. They're the places where, let's say it's the Oklahoma State game, in October. People want to go watch the game on TV. Those are the kind of places that are going to sit down, watch the football game, and have a few Cincy Lights. So the fact that it's getting to Lexington and Dayton, I think that's great. I think even beyond that, there could be some spots that tend to have a lot of Cincinnati, tourists slash, what you would call not necessarily transplants, but people that go there a lot. Places like Sarasota, Florida.
Right, yeah.
Siesta Key, which is Sarasota. Places like that, Tampa area. A lot of folks from here go there. Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. You're down there and you see nothing but Cincinnati cars, when you're, at a hotel or whatever. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes. And I know they're working hard on some other deals as well. And I think it's great. And Rheingeist is certainly a good partner to be with.
Yeah, it's unique because I know Iowa has a collective and a deal with one of the breweries out there, but I don't know if East Carolina, I think, is the other one. But other than, Cincinnati, East Carolina, and Iowa, there's not too many. What would you say throughout your career, as we transition into the Big 12, what have been your most memorable moments during the AAC run?
During the AAC run, well, without question, 2021, running the table. Game wise, there's a couple that stick out. The UCF game, the Sauce Gardner game when he was a freshman and picked off Dylan Gabriel to put a little space between Cincinnati and UCF. That was a huge one. Interestingly enough, the one that really stands out to me, and it may not be as significant as that one, was the SMU game in 2020. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is we were not allowed. We went to get COVID tested that Monday. Okay, so the Monday before the game, Dan, myself, and Mo, we went to get our COVID tests by the Cincinnati team doctors. And we all, we were all negative, which was great. We're ready to get on the charter, not ready to get on, but we were, ready to go to the game, doing all our prep work and so on. And on Wednesday, we get a call saying, hey, you guys can't go. Said, okay, why not? We knew the reason why. It just was too much of a risk. And it was just one of those things where COVID was spreading so fast that there was no way in the world they were going to let us go. So what took place was a kind of a scramble, not necessarily a scramble is not the right word, but we needed to figure out how we were going to do this. And so we picked out a spot and we were going to do it from the press box, but we did it from the media room in the arena, in Fifth Third Arena. And not only that, the World Series was going on. This was late October, might even been early November. I don't remember the exact date, but the World Series was going on. It was an ESPN game, right? Well, one of the things ESPN was doing during the World Series, whatever programming they had on, they were cutting away to World Series highlights or something significant that had happened. So we knew that if they cut away, that we were not going to get to see the game. So Bill Frigge, who works in the athletic department over there, is just a great guy and knows his way around. He knew somebody at ESPN. We were able to get a direct feed from the ESPN truck. Now, it was a roaming camera, meaning we had no control over what it was going to show, but as long as it was showing part of the field, we could see it. So we were able to do that. We were able to kind of keep the game going, make it interesting. And then Desmond Ridder just had the game of his career. Maybe it wasn't statistically the best, but I'm telling you what, he blew them away. And it just sticks out at me because of how we had to do the game. And then to watch Desmond do what he did that night, the whole team, but at the same time, Desmond had a 91-yard touchdown run and
threw up right before the play.
Yeah. So it was just a game that I remember. So, but certainly, the UCF game and what would that have been? 19?
Yep.
I'm not sure.
2019.
Yep. Yeah. And then the other one that stuck out was the Houston game and the conference championship game. So that was a tough situation, but to see that crowd empty onto the field, I had to go down and interview Fickle, but all the way down the steps, I'm crying like a baby. It was like just seeing everybody rush onto the field like that. It was a big day. So that's kind of my AAC. The clam bake was nice too.
Yeah,
up in Newport, Rhode Island. But those are some big games.
What about in general? What are some of your favorite moments over the years?
Yeah,
I assume Notre Dame's up there, right?
Big time. That I didn't mention that because it's non-conference, but that was up there too. Same thing. There wasn't, of the four of us in the booth that day, it was actually five. Dan Hord's son Sam was there, but the other four, Brad Ellis, who's our stats guy, myself, Mo Egger, and Dan Hord. Dan had the call of the decade. Now, the one thing about the Notre Dame game, and Dan's phenomenal, but the one good part is that game was pretty much in hand with a few minutes to go. And he came up with the call. It was just phenomenal. But all of us, we were like, we had to do everything we could to hold back the tears just from just from being ecstatic in that game. And that certainly was a big one by all means. The Pittsburgh game in 2009 was a huge game as well.
Mm-hmm.
Being down 20, what were we down? Down 17 at halftime. Could have been, it was 24, I think. Marty Gilliard ran the kickoff back right before halftime, and to win that game, I mean, that was a big one as well. And some of the other things, there were games along the way that, Cincinnati shouldn't have won that did. The Bearcats shouldn't have won but did. So there's a lot of them, but those are kind of the big ones.
Is there anything you're going to miss about the AAC, or are you just ready to move on?
I'll miss Tampa.
Yeah.
I like Tampa a lot, and I could jump on a plane and go there in an hour and a half anyway. I will not miss. These no knock on the universities or the cities. I won't miss East Carolina. I won't miss Philadelphia. And again, not because Philadelphia is a bad city. I won't miss Temple. So yeah, no. There's nothing. Unfortunately, Tulane in New Orleans, we didn't get, even though we were there, about 3 years ago, COVID was around and it's different. So now that COVID's done, I'll miss New Orleans as well. Although that's a place you could go there 2 or 3 times and it's like, yeah, that's enough.
Yeah. The thing about the American is they had great destinations to go to games, between Tampa, Orlando, Dallas, Fort Worth. They had places you could go. You're like, yeah, this is all Memphis. Memphis was always one of my favorite places to go for basketball.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the difference there is, and it's for Dan, not for me, So what you hit on, Ryan, is exactly why Dan Hoard's been able to not really miss a game, because those cities are so big. He can get a flight out. If we do an early game, like a noon game or a 3:30 game, he can get out that night. If let's say we play a night game, he can still get out usually 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning, leaving an AAC city. The only one that wasn't big was Greenville, North Carolina, where East Carolina was.
Sure.
All the rest of them had major airports. So he could get from, from Orlando to, to the Denver Broncos game, the Bengals Broncos game, or wherever. It was, to his credit, he made it happen. There were times he had to drive a few hours just to get, a direct flight or whatever, but he was able to do that. Not so much when you're coming out of Ames, Iowa, or Lubbock, Texas.
Right.
You've got a little less flexibility in how you're going to get to things. Now, we don't know game times for the most part. We know a few of them in the early season, but we don't know, and then this is perfect for him. We do know we have a very, very late game in Provo, Utah. However, it's on a Friday night, so he can go back on the charter with the team, lose a little sleep, but he'll be up on Saturday, be able to go with the Bengals to wherever their game is that day. I'm not sure where it is.
So what are you looking forward to the most about the Big 12?
The venues, the new places, and the traditions. The AAC had some. These schools have been doing it a lot longer. I was hoping, really, with Texas and Oklahoma leaving, I've done a game at Oklahoma already. Cincinnati played there a while back. I was really hoping to get to Austin this year before Texas left the league. That isn't going to happen. And then I was hoping for some new stadiums. Well, because we played West Virginia quite a bit. That's a road game. We played BYU just once, but I've been to Provo. Houston was in our league. I've been there half a dozen times, if not more. So from that perspective, the only new stadium for me this year is in Stillwater at Oklahoma State. So I'm really looking forward to that. Next year, and I don't know if it'll be a home or away game. Texas Tech will fall in there. Iowa State's on the schedule this year, but they're coming to Cincinnati. I've been to TCU a few times, but I would go back to Fort Worth in a heartbeat. That's a really, really nice area.
Same.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area. So I'm looking forward to all of them. We've been with UCF for quite a while now, but it's always nice to get to Florida, particularly if it's, late October, November, something like that when it's cold up here.
Right. So you've got an interesting story outside of broadcasting. You've been to a bunch of different stadiums.
I have.
I got to hear the story because we got into it a little bit down at Media Days, but we didn't get to discuss the entire story.
Right. So somewhere along the way, so I played 72 through 75, and we were not in a league. So we played a lot of different teams. So, for example, I'm trying to think, in 74, we opened at Washington in Seattle, right? We also, 72, we played at Colorado. We played, I'm trying to think who else we played in 72, but 74, we opened at Washington. We played Rice in Houston. We played Houston in Houston. So we kind of went everywhere. Well, somewhere along the way, when I had kind of been done playing, and I coached a year after I was done playing, we played that year in 76, played at Georgia, at Maryland, out south at that time, Southwest Louisiana, at Tulane. So all of a sudden I sat back and went, man, I've been to pretty many college football stadiums. Well, then through my regular business, a number of different jobs that I traveled, I would just always stop. And the places that I hadn't been, if I was in Chicago, I'd go to Northwestern. I was in Madison, Wisconsin one time, literally trying to get into Camp Randall Stadium there. I couldn't get in. There was a chain. A guy saw me and says, what's going on here? I said, well, told him who I was, that this is when I was broadcasting. I'm a broadcaster for the University of Cincinnati. My goal is to get to every Division I stadium in the country, and this was certainly one on my list that I haven't been to. He goes, well, come on, I'll get you in, and went out of his way. He said, go down onto the 50-yard line. Do you have a camera with you? And if there was cell phones, they weren't like they are today with cameras and everything. I said, nah, I don't. He said, that's all right. So, he gave me 15, 20 minutes just to walk around the stadium. I was able to do the same thing. I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico one day, was able to talk my way into a stadium. So it was one of those things where all of a sudden, as I got up there in the number of stadiums I'd been to, it's like, okay, I'm going to try to do this. Well, through broadcasting mostly, but then through business, I got up to about 92 Division I stadiums. But what happened about 10 years ago, I think it started, there was 108 what we call FBS now, so Division I. So there was about 108 of those. Well, then one year it became 110, then it became 114, then 120. Now it's like 132. And it's like, yeah, that's okay. I don't, no offense, but I don't really want to try to hit all the little ones down. There's a bunch of leagues, the Sun Belt and things like that, not that I have, again, any problem with that. The Sun Belt's a really, really fun league to watch, but it's like, yeah, I'm good. So at the time, every time I went to a new stadium, I would get an 8x10 picture of that stadium, either kind of pirated off their website, or in some cases, I actually was able to get to their bookstore and buy a real quality picture of the stadium. So I had that framed, and I had it by conference, like top to bottom, alphabetically. And then I had a hat rack that went on each side. Well, actually, the pictures went on each side of the hat, and I had a hat that corresponded to that. And like I said, I got up to about 92. And unfortunately, when I moved to my new house here, I thought, I don't want to do that to the walls. So anyway, there's some that I really would like to get to still. So as far as you look at, everybody always says, what's your favorite stadium? And there's all different reasons for going to them. I've been to all the big ones with the exception of Texas A&M. I've not been there yet. I've been to, and I'm not sure who's the biggest. So been to Michigan, been to Ohio State, been to Tennessee, been to Penn State, been to Oklahoma. They're up over 90 now. Been to Alabama, so those are big stadiums. I think Texas A&M's officially 5th. So that is one that I'd like to get to. And honestly, as far as what would be my favorite stadium, it's hard to say. It maybe it was the food that day that I liked, or maybe it was just somebody I met that was really nice. In most of the places I've been to on a regular basis, the people treat you really, really well. We've had some incidents along the way. There are some schools that will go nameless that their fans can just be nasty.
Yeah.
Most of them, you don't have to think too hard on this, and most of them are big state schools that do not have an NFL team in town, and just kind of think that the only thing that in the world is, their football team. And there's nothing wrong with that. You should support them, but at the same time, you don't have to treat the incoming fans in a bad way. So,
right.
I look at Brigham Young, been there, as we talked about, those fans were just phenomenal. Notre Dame, there wasn't
Notre Dame fans were
across a person there that had anything bad to say, even after getting beat. Penn State was that way. They just they're thrilled to have you there. Oklahoma, quite honestly, when we were down there, they were very, very gracious. So it can be anything. And one team in the AAC, I'll just leave it at that. Well, let's put it this way: they're in North Carolina, so that keeps you guessing. We were walking from the media parking lot to the stadium, and we had to go through the student tailgate area. Most of the folks out there were just, having a beer, playing cornhole. And somebody decided, they saw the Cincinnati shirts. Somebody winged a full, not an open, a full beer can at Mo Egger. I don't know if they were aiming for Mo, but they hit Mo right in the face. So, that's the kind of thing. But that being said, even that school, that's one person doing something stupid,
Right.
So it happens everywhere.
Speaking of Mo Egger and Dan Horde, you've been with Dan for a long time. I think you said you're in your 23rd year with him.
This will be our 23rd year together, yes.
What has that relationship been like, just working with him over the years? Because he's one of the best in the game, one of the best to do it.
He is. He is just he's so daggone good. And there's a reason for that, is he works his butt off. He studies and reads and does research. He's just phenomenal. And the other part of it is, in an industry where you can meet some egomaniac type people in the media, Dan's the most down-to-earth guy that you've ever meet. He's just a nice guy, and he's fun to be around. We have a good time when we're on the road in particular, but we know what our job is. So we go out, have a nice dinner, maybe sit at the bar, but not for long. It's like, okay, we got to go to bed. We got to get up. We got to do this game. And he's so easy to work with, but at the same time, he makes it such a delight. And I mentioned the Notre Dame call before. I mean, he's had the Pittsburgh call, the 2009 game, that he didn't have time to prepare it. The Sauce Gardner pick in the UCF game, the Miami game in Fickell's first year in 2000, was that 16, I believe, it might have been 17, where all they had to do was basically run a few more seconds off the clock, punt the ball away, and that game was over. And that streak that we have now coming up on 16 years would have been gone. But they made a couple of mistakes down the stretch, and he had a pick six and ended up losing the game. And Dan was he was incredible in that game. Really incredible. He's got a really good knack for it. He's very talented. Like I said, he works his butt off. He studies hard. He does all the things you need to do to be good. Because
you've obviously worked with and around different coaches over the years, what would you say are the biggest differences between Satterfield and some of the other coaches you've been around?
Yeah, he's a little different. I haven't spent that much time with him yet, and I will answer that question probably a little different in late August when we're leaving Higher Ground.
Yeah.
Because being out there, literally sometimes every day, I'll spend a lot more time with him. But he's very cerebral. He doesn't talk as much than like Tuberville talk, but in a weird way. Brian Kelly just all the time was talking. Fickell was a little bit more reserved too. But once you got behind closed doors with Fickell, he would open up to you. Took us a while to get to that point. Even Dan, he was so close to all of us for a while. And then he, we got to know him real well. He got to know us real well, and he could trust us. And in Coach Satterfield's case, his philosophy, Luke was really big on culture. He was building that locker room. This is our culture, and not that Scott Satterfield isn't, but he's just like, this is what we do. This is why we're doing it, and everything fits together for him from his particularly on the offensive side, because that's what he does. He's got a philosophy, and why every particular play that they run somehow ties into another play. And you were there, Ryan. You heard we had the big announcement that Evan Prater is moving to wide receiver, and you heard Scott Satterfield say, "Well, here's the reason why. Number one, we got to get him on the field. He's an athlete. Number two, we can bring him in jet motion. We can bring him back around the backside of the quarterback. We can do this with him. We can do that with him. And believe me, you're going to see him run reverses. You're going to see him run jet sweeps. You're going to see him get the ball, from a quarterback and be able to throw it to somebody. You're going to see all kinds of plays with Evan Prater. And that's just the way Coach Satterfield is. And if you kind of follow his career path, you'll see that going back to when he was, number one, a quarterback at App State, number two, an assistant coach, number three, the head coach at App State, then, of course, Louisville to follow. Very, very innovative in his offensive way of looking at things.
Do you think, so Cincinnati was picked to finish 13th in the league, do you think that is more a product of just the unknown, or do you think this is a roster that can surprise some people?
Yeah, well, I think it's exactly what you said. If you look at the way that whole kind of rating thing went down, with the exception of UCF, and they weren't that far above BYU, so if you look at the four new teams, right? Cincinnati was 13, Houston was 12, BYU was 11. I want to say UCF was 9, maybe 8. I don't remember. Mm-hmm. I think the unknown's the biggest part of it. I really do. UCF probably got a little bit of a nod because of John Rice Plumlee, the quarterback, who's really, really good and been there and is coming back this year. But Houston lost a lot. Cincinnati lost a lot. BYU lost a lot. So I think you're talking to a whole bunch of people that have been traditionally around the Big 12. They don't know any of these players. Now, that being said, I think you mentioned 21 transfers. Is that correct?
Yep, 21.
Cincinnati's picked up. That's a lot. And I know Coach Satterfield doesn't want to deal with that every year, and they won't have to. It's their intention to pick up high school kids. But when everybody left this year, he didn't have a choice, particularly, offensive line and receivers. You literally lost everybody. And now you go back and you look at those guys now that are in that receivers room. Throw Evan Prater in there. You got a receivers room that's going to be pretty darn good. The offensive line maybe take a little bit longer to put together, although the names that are there and the size of the guys and based on their their history, they could be good too. But the toughest thing is now with the transfer portal is putting all those pieces together and making it work in a very short period of time.
Yeah, I asked Satterfield at Big 12 Media Days, what are some of the challenges of implementing a new system, but also having so many new faces. And he made a good point that it's no different than recruiting and bringing in a bunch of freshmen. The only difference is he's now bringing in kids that have experience at this level. So the terminology and everything's a little bit easier when you're trying to get a point across.
That's right.
And he also said, kids that we brought them in because we intend to play them. We're not just trying to fill roster spots.
Yeah, see, that's the difference between transfers and a freshman. That freshman, you can redshirt or sit for a year, and they're soaking up everything like a sponge. The transfers, the good part is, most of them are, been somewhere for 3 years, maybe 4 years, depending on, the kid. And they played a lot of football. So they know maybe the terminology is a little different, but that's something they could connect very quickly. And the fact that they've played, they can make an impact right away. They have to play right away, and there can be that occasional freshman who comes in plays. I mean, that can happen. And, I hope it does. But at the same time, you don't want to just play a freshman because, he was good in high school. I mean, they have to earn it. But I like particularly the receiver room. You look at that again. They've got some guys. I mean, they got guys that caught a lot of passes last year for big teams. I mean, we're talking, Power 5 teams. So I don't
Xavier
know.
Henderson was Florida's leading receiver.
Yep. No, and got two guys from Louisville that were second and third in the team in reception. So I mean, it's not like they're bringing in nobodies and it's just like filling a roster spot, So, but we'll see. We'll see.
Do you think defensively, obviously returning Pace, Briggs, Van on the line, Dante Corleone, first team All-American, preseason first team All-Conference.
Right.
When you look at how good they should theoretically be with, also with the addition of Daniel Greshik, the front seven, do you think that's enough to at least get them in the picture to finish better than they're expected?
Well, I do. We didn't talk about defense, and the defensive side is certainly, probably looks a little bit better on paper than the offensive side right now. Do I think that's enough? Yeah, and I actually think their schedule helps them a little bit too. The fact that, if you look at the teams you're playing, your toughest games, and I shouldn't say that because we don't really know how everybody's going to, put things together, but you've got a couple of teams you're playing on the road that you could walk away with wins, that being BYU, that being Houston, that being West Virginia. Now, I may look stupid after saying that those guys end up being 2, 3, and 4 in the league because nobody's played a game yet. And you were there, I think, when Neil Brown, the West Virginia coach, was talking. He's pretty mad that they put them at 14. He wasn't taking it lightly, and he made it known. And he said, how good we're going to be. Now, yet to be determined for anybody. But I think that helps them. I think being on the defensive side, even though there was a blot made of this league 5 years ago, the Big 12, it was like, okay, let's just go out and beat them 53-48. A lot of the coaches, a handful of them, went out of their way to say this is not an offensive, not that the offenses are bad, but there's a lot better defense in this league right now. So that being said, I think with that front you were talking about, they're going to be good. They can run on the back end too. Now, everybody else can run too, but all in all, I think the defensive side will keep them in games. How quickly the offense will evolve and what they're, how good they're going to be able to be, how explosive they're going to be able to be. I don't know that yet.
Yeah, I think the defense, I think, should be really strong this year with not only the additions to the front seven, but also the secondary with DJ Taylor and Jordan Young. So there's a lot. And then you return Sammy Anderson, Brian Threats in the back of the defense.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to like on that side of the ball. But, man, I think the offense is the biggest thing it comes down to. Emory Jones getting enough time and protection because
and that's that offensive line piece is a tough one. I mean, you lost 5 guys between exhausting their eligibility and transfers last year. Those guys are gone. So it's it's same thing as you were talking about with the receivers. You're bringing in a couple of guys with experience, but that's something where. I've seen it where you've got to be 10 deep at that, at least 8 deep. And 1 or 2 of those guys has to be able to switch from guard to tackle or tackle to guard or, guard to center as we saw last year. Where if you look at the premier programs, the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Ohio States, those guys go 15 deep, and that's the huge difference right now. And maybe it'll be better off than I think. But, just in the reason I say that, it's not necessarily the caliber of talent, it's injuries. That's an area where you get nicked up pretty easily. You're doing your job, you're locked onto somebody, and all of a sudden somebody comes into, the side of your leg. And even though you got a brace, at your knee, somebody rolls your ankle or does whatever to you, you get a hip pointer or something like that. You're going to lose a few guys, at least for a few weeks. And that's one where you need to be buttoned up and have at least, if you can get 8 to 10, guys that can play for you there and you can use a little bit of flexibility. people ask me all the time, how good are they going to be? It's so hard. I went to spring ball, and there's 15 practices, right? The 15th one was the spring scrimmage. So there was really 14 practices, and there's even been transfers coming in after that.
Right.
So it's like, how do you know? How do you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, and I think it's going to be a different scheme. You know, you return Miles Montgomery, Corey Kiner, Ryan Montgomery, all in the backfield, but it's going to be a different scheme. It's more of an outside zone. So I think the strength of the offensive line will probably be the interior with Radisevich, Gavin Gerhardt, and Luke Kandra, as long as, you know, they're healthy, obviously. But I think that's going to be the strength. So seeing how that translates to more of an outside zone run scheme, as well as more misdirection, jet sweeps, reverses. It's kind of, I think it's going to be a lot more fun. It seems like there's, especially watching the spring game, it seems like there's more creativity, even in the pass game, using a lot of wheel routes out of the backfield to get the running backs involved, wide receiver screens, running back screens. I just think it's more opportunities for different explosive plays.
Well, you know, and pick your quarterback, but let's just say Emory Jones right now, because he appears to be the guy going into, the Camp Higher Ground in the summer camp as the starter at this particular point in time. Although Brady Drogish, everybody likes him. I liked him, and I think he's the future. But that being said, both of those two guys, they can run the football, so that's going to be a part of it as well. And kind of tying on to everything you said with the jet sweeps and the fake jet sweeps and reverses, and even that outside zone game that you're talking about. I mean, that could be a big part where quarterback running the football can make something happen, and or, you know, getting onto the edge with the RPOs with a run pass option, you know, the wheel routes. I mean, just like you said, it's different. It's different. It really is. And it's hard for me to say that it's going to be effective because I haven't really seen them play anybody but themselves right now.
Right.
But there was times, and I'm sure you fell into this category, particularly I could tell that, that the fan base did, that they felt the offense last year was very boring. I'm not talking about Coach Satterfield. I'm talking about, Coach Fickle and Coach Gaduli. It wasn't, boring's not the right term, but very predictable. The inside zone runs that would pick up 1 yard, things like that. People got real tired of it. But then again, I think it's one of those things, if you're successful, it's like, yeah, that offense coordinator is great. If you're not successful, get rid of the guy, But that being said, right now your head coach he's not your offensive coordinator by name, but he's the guy calling the plays.
Right. So what do you think year one is a realistic expectation?
Yeah, I'm not going to pick a record.
Right. Yeah.
But I think
you can toss-ups on the schedule.
Yeah, I think you can steal a few that you maybe weren't supposed to win. I mean, here's one to me that I think is big. Can you beat Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh? That'd be a big win. I mean, they're 24th, 25th in the country. They're probably looking at Cincinnati going, what a train wreck. We watched them play Louisville at the the Boston Red Sox field.
Fenway Bowl.
Yeah, thank you. Couldn't think of the name of the stadium. Can you knock that one off? And can you be, and not to minimize our good friends up the road at Miami, but can you get out of your non-conference schedule at 3-0? I mean, that would be huge. You're going to lose in the league. At least, I mean, you don't go into it with that, but more than likely, as you and I are sitting here, there's going to be some teams that are going to be really, really hard to beat. But, you take those 3 games, and let's say you only win 2 of the 3 of those, beating West Virginia on the road, beating BYU on the road, knocking off Kansas at home. That's doable. They've got a great quarterback, but at the same time, if you've got a good defense and you can contain him, you can beat him. So, I mean, and here's the other thing about the Big 12 is you look at the bowl schedule. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, 6-6 teams, somebody that finished 7th or 8th in the conference is going to a really, really nice bowl where in the American, you weren't going anywhere. I mean, you were maybe going somewhere, but it was like, it's one of those games you're watching at, 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and there's 1,000 people on each side. It's like,
right,
I want to be there.
I think bowl eligible should be a realistic
Well,
expectation.
and that's kind of
Anything
where I was
above
going with that. I
yeah.
think it's certainly doable. It really is. Now, again, you got to play well. And again, you asked me this in late August, I might have a better idea. Although I certainly, I can't tell you how good Oklahoma State's going to be, or Iowa State, or or Oklahoma or West Virginia. Not that early. I'm not going to their camps.
I will say Mike Gundy was probably my favorite interview at Big 12 Media Days. He must have just been in a mood that day, man, because he was NIL, transfer portal, Oklahoma State, Bedlam rivalry. Anything you asked him, he was open and honest, and he was willing to talk at length about it.
Yeah, I thought his line about Bedlam was the best of the day. Basically, what I asked him about continuing the Oklahoma State rivalry, he goes, "We didn't cancel it," or whatever he said. I forget exactly what he said. We had nothing to do with it.
We're not playing anymore because Oklahoma decided to go to the SEC.
Yeah, exactly. Better said. But yeah, and I get that. I mean, you think about the people down there; how they would love to see that game continue, and so would I. I mean, it's one of the things that I want to do when I'm done broadcasting. Is there are some places in some games that I want to go to. That would certainly be one of them. The Red River rivalry would be another one. All the big ones. Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Auburn, places like that.
Yeah. Well, Jim, this has been a lot of fun. Definitely glad you were able to come on tonight. And
thanks for having me, Ryan. Yeah.
I look forward to catching up with you soon. I'm sure we'll cross paths at either Higher Ground or a different football event.
Absolutely. Maybe we'll catch a Cincy Light together.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm down whenever.
Okay. Sounds good.
This has been Ryan Roberts with tonight's At Large Bid podcast. Up next, we'll have ESPN 1530's Mo Ager.